Now we know what happens to today when it becomes yesterday, what happens to the present when it becomes the past. It waits, dead and empty and deserted. It waits for them. It waits for the timekeepers of eternity, always running along behind, cleaning up the mess in the most efficient way possible. Imagine you wake up and you've left our reality and entered something different. The memory of a world, the shell of a world slowly dying, the back end, the auto-clean function of time. We'll talk about all that and more as we examine The Langoliers, one of my favorite novellas by Stephen King. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. I want to tell a bit of a personal story in this one because The Langoliers and Stephen King as a whole has kind of a special place in my past. So as a kid, I spent a lot of time camping and, the older I got, the more boring that became, if I'm being honest. One of the campgrounds I visited had an old, dusty, one-room, you wouldn't even call it a building really, a shack, which served as a take one, leave one library. The library, which contained mostly books from the 90s and earlier, had some great horror selections, including House of Leaves, which I was way too young for, and 4 Past Midnight, which is a collection of novellas by Stephen King. The Langoliers is the first novella in 4 Past Midnight, and it really imprinted on me. It has every hallmark of a Stephen King story, from the children who know more than they should to a glimpse at something deeper about our reality, and it's also just very fun. I recently reread it on a short trip, and it's excellent as an airplane book, but it's also a great mystery, so if you haven't read it yet and you've got any desire to, you should before watching this video. So, on a flight from Los Angeles to Boston, something very, very strange happens. We see, and I'm putting air quotes on that, first the situation through Dinah. The air quotes are because Dinah is blind. However, she has not only enhanced senses, especially of hearing, but also an instinct which allows her to sense people. This instinct actually develops into a power, but that's not really why we're here, and I'm not going to talk so much about the actual character moments in this story. You should read it yourself if that's what you're interested in. However, Dinah wakes up shortly into her red-eye flight to Boston and realizes that her keeper, her aunt who's accompanying her on the trip, is not beside her. She feels around both with her hands and her instincts and doesn't find anyone nearby. As she searches the plane, reaching across seats, she finds purses and eventually something that makes her scream, what she believes to be the scalp of one of the passengers. This scream wakes up nearly all of the passengers remaining on the flight. However, that's far fewer than the amount which actually departed from Los Angeles. Flight 29 comprised a half-filled 767. There should have been at least 100 passengers on this plane. Instead, those waking to the scream discover that there's only 11 people remaining, and that's only where the mystery begins. In the place of passengers, the survivors find purses, dentures, surgical pins, even a wig, which a blind girl could mistake for a scalp. There's no explanation for this. There's a pilot on board, he can't figure it out. There's no evidence that the plane stopped, and none of the plane's crew, including pilot or co-pilot, remain to provide an explanation. There would, however, be a far more disturbing revelation. As the survivors, including the surviving pilot, attempt to continue the journey and land the plane in Boston, they realize that all signs of human life have disappeared. There's no radio, not even on emergency broadcast bands. There's no sign of civilization in city lights below, even when they pass over major cities like Denver. Something is seriously not right, and it starts creeping everyone out. Eventually, even with turbulence and a lack of active navigational data, the new captain of the ship manages to land the plane safely, not in Boston as originally intended, but shocker if you're a Stephen King fan, Bangor, Maine. This is where the strange moves to horrifying, and the passengers begin to lose all hope, realizing that they've gotten themselves in a pickle which defies any sort of scientific explanation. The world is dead. The runway of the Bangor airport has all the things you'd expect a runway to have. Other planes, motorized vehicles, cart trolleys, but no people, no lights, nothing alive or moving. And when the passengers debark the airplane, they realize that this isn't just something localized to the area. They've entered somewhere, something different. The place they're in is almost a shadow of the world. Sound doesn't propagate properly. Things don't have taste. Everything is muted and silent and dead. We find ourselves in a world which appears to be whole, but it is also a world which seems almost exhausted. The carbonated drinks are flat. The food is tasteless. The air is odorless. We still give off scents. I can smell Laurel's perfume and the captain's aftershave lotion, for instance, but everything else seems to have lost its smell. Albert picked up one of the glasses with beer in it and sniffed deeply. There was a smell, he decided, but it was very, very faint. A flower petal pressed for many years between the pages of a book might give off the same distant smell. Also, the clouds aren't moving, there's no wind. There is what appears to be some sort of day-night cycle, but it's erratic and speeding up. None of the electronics work, all the clocks have stopped at 4:07 a.m., and real objects are losing their effect, their potency. Matches, for example, mostly don't work, although they may spark for a second. Strangely, however, as mentioned in that brief excerpt, the passengers and even their things from the plane still maintain an air of reality, and this is where the mystery starts to solidify slightly. Before the flight, there are reports of strange phenomenon, aurora borealis, over mainland America, something which is decidedly strange, especially according to the captain, given the time of year. The passengers all note that, well, 152 of them disappeared from the plane. The 11 which remained were all sleeping. So few were sleeping on a red eye because whatever happened only 20 minutes or so after takeoff. The true nature of the anomaly, the phenomenon, the event is some sort of rip in time. The plane travels through it, and for some reason, only those sleeping remain. The others, they perish in situations likened to Roanoke, Amelia Earhart, perhaps most appropriately the Mary Celeste. But what's happened is they've not traveled to an alternate dimension or to a far distant time. Rather, they're slightly off the timeline, maybe as little as 15 minutes off. But they're in a world of the past, and they're about to encounter the custodians of the past. It starts first as a distant murmur. Everyone describes it in a different way, whether it's Rice Krispies after milk is poured in it, radio static, chittering, whatever the word is. It's getting closer. Eventually, the survivors have the plan to travel back through the void, following the plane's navigational systems backwards, with the hope that fuel brought back onto the plane, which seems to be a vessel ripped from the present, will still be useful. They're right, but as they're leaving, they encounter the Langoliers. The Langoliers, which are first spotted in the distance, are small, bouncing balls, which upon closer inspection are mostly a very large mouth filled with teeth, which are eating away the fabric of reality. Where the Langoliers pass, they leave strips of nothingness, of pure abyss, like tearing away at sections of a piece of paper. First, one or two Langoliers appear, destroying trees, the tarmac, everything, then millions, billions, certainly there are trillions upon trillions upon trillions of these things, deleting the past of Earth itself, cleaning things up. These are a fundamental force of our reality, operating always behind the scenes in a way that really an ordinary person should never encounter. The plane escapes, however, and in tracking its progress, it does find a wormhole, the thing which must have been responsible for the reports of aurora borealis. They travel through it, they begin to land in Los Angeles. Some of the passengers celebrate, but something is not right. People are not there. The Earth still seems deserted, although not dead like before. Food has taste, there's wind, the air smells. Our passengers have now went the opposite direction. They're a few minutes ahead of where they should be. But while previously time threatened to leave them behind, this time, however, they hear a different harbinger. Rather than a dreadful buzzing, they hear almost a choral humming. And soon, with the shifting ghosts of soon-to-be people roaming the airport halls, the past catches up with them and they experience a rebirth into the present, ending the story of the Langoliers. This phenomenon, however, does not seem to be localized to this plane alone, as the book actually ends, and this is a detail some people miss, with all flights across the country basically being shut down because of these strange weather patterns, which have presumably now destroyed several planes, or at least destroyed the people on the planes. That's always one of the questions I've had. What happens to the people who don't make that very strange journey? Do their bodies remain while the plane disappears for them to fall to their death? Are they taken someplace stranger? We never really find out, and it's left for you to interpret. It is sort of an interesting thing though. When you go through the wormhole, it almost like disconnects your body from reality, because instead of moving forward with time, the longer these people are in this other dimension, the further back they get from the present, as heralded by the approach of the Langoliers. If you don't keep moving with time, you'll be destroyed, as the back rooms are wiped away. A few days ago, I talked about liminal spaces and liminality, and this is a great example of liminal art, which I think is sometimes ignored, and someone actually pointed this out in the comment section of that video. I find airports and airplanes to be quite liminal. They represent an in-between place, a transition, literally. But many of the characters in the novel are also at inflection points or transition points of their life, whether it's a surgery to get vision, the death of a loved one, a job, and really a lifestyle which is about to end, or a move to adulthood. So they're already in that space, and they're taken even further to a place between places, a back rooms, a part of the universe that represents an in-between, or really a forgotten. Anyway, that's all that I really wanted to say about the Langoliers. Just a story that I've always really enjoyed, and I hope that this encourages you to pick it up. I have covered some of the basic points, but there's a lot, especially regarding the characters in particular, which I've gone out of my way not to spoil. The Langoliers really is as much a mystery novel as a science fiction or horror novel, and the interaction between the characters, while cheesy, is also pretty enjoyable. So I'd recommend the novella. It's only barely a novella. It's got to be like almost 300 pages just with other stories. But until next time, be safe, have a good one. I look forward to reading all of your feedback down below, and may the force be with you.